Greetings, fellow humans. I'm MartianBuu, and today I wanted to talk about some twist balance changes that are happening in the near future. So they showed a teaser on the Twitters. Glide, Crypt Keeper, and Refreshing Spring Water. They have a white border, which in the past has meant that a card is entering or exiting the pool of cards. And now they've added a little red minus sign, so we know that these cards are getting removed. So I'm going to talk about how that affects each of the decks that they're in, what I expect the meta to look like afterwards, and whether or not I think the changes were good. First up, we have Questline Druid. Questline Druid is losing Crypt Keeper. Crypt Keeper is really important for early tempo in Questline Druid, and if you look at the wild version, you're actually down a zero cost minion already. The wild version runs Arcane Giant. So without Crypt Keeper, you only have Umbral Owl left. You have to lose Mark of the Spike Shell. Mark of the Spike Shell, the thought process that led this to entering the deck is to copy your Guff, but copying your Guff doesn't actually matter that much, and it's not really as strong as it is to just play a zero cost Crypt Keeper, copy it for 2, and make another big one in that same turn. So you lose Crypt Keeper, Mark of the Spike Shell, which was one of the better like filler cards, you're down to, so there's just a lot of extra space in the deck. So now without the Crypt Keepers, your early free tempo that was making it hard to come back against the Questline Druid is basically gone, and you have to put even more filler cards in the deck. We were already looking at the bottom of the barrel trying to find things with like discover effects, so I expect this deck to fall off almost entirely. So now I've put the 3 mana attack cards in here. They are slow, they feel expensive, and decks that get on board are going to have a much easier time beating Questline Druid. So I expect it to fall off almost entirely, at least from the top tier meta. Next up, we have Questline Demon Hunter, which is losing Glide. So Glide is really important, specifically in the Priest matchup. We're going to go over the Priest deck in a second, but basically they store up some combo pieces and then they just play a ton of cards for free all in the same turn. And with Glide, you can put all the stuff that they gathered while they're preparing for their pop-off turn back in their deck. Generally, outside of that, Glide is just kind of a decent draw option, but I think it matters a lot less for this deck than the Crypt Keeper mattered for Questline Druid. I expect Questline Demon Hunter to notice the absence of Glide, but I don't think it's even going to drop a tier. I think it's still going to be one of the better decks in the game. If you type in draw, what can we find? Our Rushy Friends. Need for Greed, probably a little expensive, but you can trade it. You can also go up on the Sage. So we lose the Glides, we put in a second Sage, or we put in, I think I saw Corbett doing this. There it is. Boom. Second Wayward Sage or 2 of the Rush the Stage. However, I think that losing Glide matters because that was good against Mage and Priest. Mage likes to get a bunch of cards and go off with Halatu, so it's going to matter against those decks. It's like the only hand disruption in the whole format, but generally I expect the deck to recover and do just fine. And finally we have Mage, which is losing Refreshing Spring Water. So this one I don't even know how to evaluate because like, was Mage even that good in the first place? The deck isn't lacking draw, right? So we still have Cram Session, we still have Volume Up, we still have Arcane Intellect. I don't think you put in another draw card, but it's not like the deck didn't have draw before. So we lose that. And then I guess what you can run is like Rewind. Yeah. So Rewind, probably touch on in a second because when we get to the commentary, but like, getting the extra solid alibis be very annoying. But yeah, I don't expect this deck to really get that impacted. I think the Refreshing Spring Water is like free draw, right? So like it's kind of like Glide where it's not like this deck isn't going to notice, but is it really going to make the difference between this being a relevant deck or not? I don't think so. So those are the decks getting hit. Let's look at the decks that didn't get hit. So Questline Shaman, I think, is just up there with Druid and Demon Hunter as far as like really powerful decks. And this one didn't get hit at all. So I expect Questline Shaman to be extremely good, especially now that some of the other good decks have been hit kind of hard. The Druid one more than the Demon Hunter one. So what this deck does is it gathers a bunch of overload, turbos through the quest, and you use Charge Call to manipulate the shallow discover pools to get some really strong minions. The important ones are 7, where you only have, you can always get your Glug because you only have these 3. so you can always discover Glug. 8 lets you discover either this that heals you a bunch or Alakir that has charge. And then 9, you get Overlord Drakuru, Rushwind Fury, steal your opponent's stuff. You will really want to be using it on 7, 8, or 9, because once you get to 10, you know, it's kind of stupid. And then you have the other overload stuff you can do otherwise. So the Brukan makes it so that all of your spells cast twice. You can just stack a bunch of overload and blow your opponent up with overdraft, lightning bolts, and spell damage. So this has just been like a really strong deck. It's like one of the best decks in the game, and it's not getting touched at all. Nazmani Priest. So I haven't played much of this myself, but I've seen it and I've been annoyed by it. They do basically nothing for the first few turns, and then on turn like 3 or 4, they play a Nazmani, and then they just go to the moon, play their whole hand, you know, play free Elec mounts. Dragon pool is really shallow, so you have Draconid Operative, Incriminating Psychic, Nether Drake, and Skeletal Dragon. So your chances of getting the dragon you want off of Draconic Studies is really high. So you either like get a bunch of Skeletal Drakes out and have infinite value, infinite free things, or you get your Elec mount. You build a wall that can't be broken through. This deck is benefiting from Demon Hunter losing Glide, as well as just the better decks getting nerfed and not this one. Although I'm pretty sure this was a really favored deck into Questline Druid, so maybe it loses it a little bit by having one of its favored matchups drop. So Glide was one of the big ways to interact with this deck. And then finally, the other big spooky that's not getting hit is Poison Rogue. So this one, while I was looking at HS Replay, I don't think people are even playing it. Like, I don't think a lot of people are playing it right now, and in large part, that's due to Questline Druid, and Questline Druid is getting gutted. So the Questline Druid deck had the cheap taunts, and it has a bunch of armor while it goes face. So much like in Wild with Questline Druid versus Kingsbane, it was really preventing this deck from taking hold. But without that, it's going to be a lot easier to just get your Swine Tusk Shank out, buff it with a bunch of poisons, and hide behind your Cloak of Shadows and Scabs until your opponent's hero explodes. One of the things that this deck can start doing is running Deafen if the Priest deck pops off. If people start playing the Priest deck a lot, Silence is going to be important because of the Elec card that gives your minions taunt, and the Skeletal Drakes, obviously, they come with taunt. So you can get around those with the Deafen and go face. You can also get around them with Scabs. So how do I feel about the changes? Overall, I feel two ways about it, I guess. I feel like if they were going to change something, they should have changed more, and they should have changed more decisively. In the case of Questline Druid, I'm expecting the deck to fall off completely, but in the case of Questline Demon Hunter, which was the better deck, even if it was less popular, I don't expect it to lose enough ground for it to stop being annoying. In both of those cases, I feel like the questline was the right card to ban from the format if you were going to make a change at all, just because it gets rid of them decisively and opens up the format for sure. But like dancing around those cards, I don't think accomplishes something that's worth doing. In the case of Mage, like I don't understand why the Mage deck is getting targeted at all. Maybe that's like a lower MMR thing, or maybe they expected it to really take off with some adjustments to the higher decks. But if they were going to make a change to Mage, I think that the problem card is Solid Alibi. Solid Alibi is one of the most frustrating cards to play against in the entire game, and it's like the only other thing in that tier is like Ice Block, which isn't in this format. So I'd have much rather seen Solid Alibi go and allow decks to kind of end the game versus Mage instead of just sitting behind a wall of a bunch of Solid Alibis. And then if you're going to do that, I think that you have to ban the Shaman questline as well as Swine Tusk Shank, and that gets rid of the stuff that I think is most frustrating to play against all at once and has a big decisive impact on the format. But more than that, I think what I wanted them to change was nothing. I don't like the idea of these twist formats, which are already so small. They all already only last for a whole month. And so if you're going to craft a deck for a format that you know is going to last only a month, you should get the month out of that, right? If we're expecting significant changes to the most powerful decks a week or two into these twist formats, I feel like it's really going to discourage people from investing in the format whatsoever. I think that in general with twist, the first couple weeks should be figuring out what the best stuff is, and the second couple weeks should be people like doing their best to master the deck in a short time and get their like whatever finish. Unless there's like one thing that's like absurdly broken, so far above broken or everything else that you like can't have variety in the format, and games are ending on like turn 3 and there's nothing anybody can do about it but switch to that deck or suffer. Unless there's like a super emergency nerf, like this has to change or else the whole month is ruined. I would prefer there not be any balance at all to this mode, and I don't think any of the decks on this list hit that bar, at least not yet. It could be that Poison Rogue is just obnoxious after these changes. I think I'm more lenient with this time around because we had a week extra, right? So we had that first initial week on top of the month that we're expecting, and so we kind of learned something from that week, and then we're able to apply it to the rest of the month, and so you still get the better part of a month with your deck investment. But if this is what we should expect from now on, after the first week or two in Twist, we're going to see significant hits to the top decks. I think it's going to take a lot of fun out of the format, and I really hope that that's not how things end up. All right, so that about wraps things up. Thank you so much for watching. I'll have the codes for these decks in the description. I would recommend the Questline Shaman if you want to pick something that's both proven and not getting nerfed. Make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel, and I'll see you next time. Glide, Crypt Keeper, and Refreshing Spring Water with a white border and a little minus sign. In muted? Oh, yeah. All right. Oh, I was doing so good. I was doing so good.